Hello, I'm Colin Brett. I want to spend a few moments talking with you about transactional analysis and the training that we offer in transactional analysis for coaches. So TA, transactional analysis, has been around since the 70s. It's a tried and tested way of understanding human nature so that it helps us understand who we be in the world and why we be the way we are and what can be done about that. TA is essentially a way of understanding, and for many coaches it's useful because not all of us have a psychological mindedness or a psychological background, so we actually lack frameworks and models that we can use to understand how we coach, how come we be the way we be as coaches, and how come our coachees behave in certain ways. TA is used in different contexts. Originally it was a model of psychotherapy, still used that way. It's used in counselling or one-to-one work, which could include coaching. It's used in educational settings as a way of helping educators, teachers think about how they interact with their classes. And it's used in organisations as a model for organisational development. I am a professional certified coach, and in the TA world I'm a teaching and supervising transactional analyst in organisational settings. So I've got, so to speak, two different legs, and TA helps me think about what's happening in my coaching practice. It's a flexible way of thinking. The fact that it began in the psychotherapeutic world doesn't mean that it's only used there, as I've just suggested. In fact, there's a new way of using TA called co-creative transactional analysis that invites us to think not as transactional analysts, but as transactional designers. In other words, the suggestion is that we can use TA to think forwards into the future and ask ourselves, how can I use these models to become who I actually want to become? How can I design myself, so to speak? Traditionally, TA is used in three different areas. The first is the one-to-one, the personality. So it can give us ideas on who I am, how I came to be me, why I do things, but also with that in mind, what can I plan for myself and how can I move forwards? So the first and main way TA is used is for understanding the individual. The second way is me with my history, which we call script, or a life plan, and you with your life plan. What happens when we meet? And so TA is very interested in communication, how two people send messages to each other, the obvious messages, which are the words, but the not obvious or the hidden messages, which we call ulteriors, and how relationships are built up on communication. So TA can help you understand something about yourself and other people. It can be used as a model of communication. And thirdly, where it found its first footing is in groups. So what happens in groups? And there obviously it's what goes on under the surface. I find TA really useful because it gives me some ways of understanding, so the models, the frameworks. You might know the parent-adult-child thing. Well, that's known as personal styles or ego states, and it's a major piece of TA theory. You might know the urges, the wishes to be strong, to be perfect, to please people, and so on. that's an interesting question when it comes to us as coaches. What's typical of me as a coach, and what are my strengths and my weaknesses through this lens? And how could I use that particular piece of theory, called the working styles or the drivers, to sharpen my own saw? Perhaps you know the phrase, different strokes for different folks. That's also a piece of TA theory, but it goes a bit further than just that. TA is really useful to me as a coach because it explains why people don't do things, how we manage to stay within our own framework and not greatly to move off my own track. Well, if I don't move off my own track and I, so to speak, ignore lots of stuff, I'm never going to change, not greatly. And so understanding why people don't change and what can be done about that is really, really interesting, useful. I mentioned earlier the life plan. Another way of thinking about the life plan is I am who I think I am. So who do you think you are, and how do you be that in the world? That's the kind of plan. So what is your perception of yourself? What is your perception of life? What's your perception of people? And so on. TA can give you some really good insights into that. You might know the drama triangle, the rescuer, persecutor, victim dynamic. That's a piece of TA. Many people know it. But not many people know either the potency pyramid or the winner's triangle, as it's also called. And another piece of theory connected with that, which is the guilt of the bystander. It's all good, solid TA theory. And another piece of another triangle is the question of psychological distance. How do we unawarely get closer to certain parties and distant from other parties? So think about coaching in organizations where you have the sponsor, the company, the organization, the person you're coaching, and you, and the need to have equidistant sides of the triangle rather than getting too close to one of the parties. So what I wanted to tell you here is that TA is a very useful way of helping me as a coach understand not only myself but the people I work with. And the invitation is for you to think about doing an introductory course. The TA introduction is called the 101, internationally recognized syllabus, same the world over, 2 days, 12 clock hours or more, and yes, if you'd like to know more about that, be in touch. In fact, be in touch anyway.